it's Steve. Last time on this series, we parsed our sprite sheet data and our template data into sprite sheet and template assets. This time we're going to flatten this out a little bit so that we don't have to have this many references just to reference the map. That's going to require a little bit of state management. And after that, we'll finally be able to cleanly display our tiles. Hopefully we'll be able to get that done in one episode. If not, I'll probably split it into two again, and I'll have been lying for a second time in a row about finally displaying some tiles. Editor Steve here. I was definitely a liar for a second time. The raw version of this video is just under 2 hours long. So we're going to split this into two again. But anyway, let's jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add some state management to our map loader. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to move the plugin to the top because that just makes more sense to me right now. And let's make a section for state management over here. Our states are going to be loading and done. These are the two states that our map loading is going to be in. In order to use these states, there's a whole mess of derives we need to use. So let's go get those in right now. Also, we're going to want to tag the loading as our default state of this enum. I don't know how necessary all of these derives are, but I'm pretty sure they're all not needed. But it kind of makes sense. An enum, you want it to be easy to clone and copy, debuggable, default. We need that. We need to be able to do equality statements, and I don't know, maybe do these things too. Who knows? Anyway, now that we have these states, we of course need to tell our the game engine to use them. So open our plugin here. We are going to tag that map load state in. Now our goal here is really to move a lot of these loading statements into the map loader itself. So let's define a system for doing that. We're going to call this while loading, and what we need in this is effectively the same things we need here. Actually, we don't even need the map handle IDs, I don't think. We'll also need a mutable reference to our next state, which is going to be used to tag on to the next state when all these are done loading. And here's what we're going to do. Let's start with the map assets, and we're going to iterate through all the map assets and check if they're still loading. This gives us the asset ID and the asset itself. I don't think we're actually going to need to use the asset itself. We're just going to do an if let none here to check for if this particular asset ID is still loading. And we're going to return out of this function, early return out of this function, if it is. We're going to do basically the same thing for our sprite sheets, our templates, and our images. And if all of those pass successfully, we'll just print out that we've loaded and tell the engine that we can go to the next state. And yeah, it looks like we don't need these assets, so I'm just going to use the underscore here to maintain best practice. So there's our simple while loading function. More or less all that it's going to do is print out the loadings process and then switch over to the done state. Let's also add this system in to our plugin. And what this says is we're just going to run it in the update while we're in the loading. So it's not going to be run basically after this flag is set here. It's not going to be run anymore. Convenient way to wait for the loading to be done. Next up in main. First off, let's give ourselves a little bit more data to work with so that we maybe can see the loading in progress. So we'll add the rest of our TMX files here. Next up, we only want to run our hello assets function, we'll say once on enter of the map load state done. So let's do that. Really as easy as that. Now this will only run once when everything is loaded. Now let's see if that works. Look at that, it didn't even take long enough to require that loading to happen. I'm trying to think if we can slow this down at all. And actually, let's make sure this is working because this should only be happening after that loading is done. So we, instead of matching on this, we should just expect it. Okay, so we're having a little issue here because we're checking that all the map assets, sprite sheet assets, template assets, and image assets are loaded, but We're not checking if all of these, because these are only going to populate into this list when they have been loaded. So this is always going to pass. The thing I really want to do is to check the sprite sheet and templates of the map, and also the sprite sheet of the templates and the image of all of these sprite sheets to see if those references have loaded yet. Those references would be on this RAL map data as handles, but they wouldn't yet be in these. So what we need to do is plop all these sort of things in here and grab them in a different way. So I'll go over that real quick. So instead of this for loop, we're going to check the sprite sheet data of the map asset itself. So we're going to get rid of this loop because it's only going to be on one sprite sheet, and it's going to be getting here. In this case, we actually don't even need this asset ID because this already has the map data right here, and this is never going to be none because it's in the list of map assets. So we can kill this off. And the sprite sheet is actually going to itself need an image, so this can't be an if-let, it needs to be a match. And this is going to be the none case. And for the sum case, we are going to effectively run our image asset check. And that is actually going to, instead of doing an iterator for loop again, because we're only going to have one image per sprite sheet, so let's do if let none equals sprite sheet dot sprite. Now this is matching all the map data, the sprite sheet, and the image. And we're going to effectively do the same thing for the templates, or at least the templates referenced in any loaded maps at the time. This will also reference a sprite sheet, which will also reference an image. So effectively we're going to do the same match logic. We're loading template assets in that case. And if there is some template, we're going to grab the sprite sheet asset from the template and do those checks too. Now with that and our fake extra loading time here, that should be plenty to see this in action. Wait, does it ever say loaded? It's still loading template assets? That's strange. Can't find object. Interesting. So I'm guessing this is because of these error messages here. Ah, here we go. Panicked at map loader 355. So on one of these templates, it's trying to find properties, but it can't. Aha, exit doesn't have properties. That makes sense. I think I'm gonna have this function take an optional, no. I think what I'll do is grab the object properties here, or actually I'm gonna say if let sum as a result of that find, and then I'll stick this in here. Actually, I need to do vec object property. So this way we can assign it. It's either going to be empty or we're going to assign it. So that solves that issue. All right, let's run this again. What are we seeing? So this is still loading instantly because of course it is. So let's try and add that fake load time back in. And we're going to put that in not the map loader, but the sprite sheet loader. That's a good place for it. There we go. And that 1 second wait resulted in the sprite sheets being loaded for a while. All right, this works now. So that handles the custom state tracking. Next up, let's flatten our map data a bit. this hello assets is a bit cumbersome because of all of these assets imports. What we'd rather have is just a resource called a map server that we can ask for specific maps from, and then those would all have all the data on them already. Now then, in order to achieve that, let's go ahead and define some structs to work with. So here we have our current layout of our raw map data, which has template data, and both of which have sprite sheet data. And the sprite sheet, of course, has a handle to an image. What we want is something more along the lines of this. So this is a map server that's effectively going to be taking the role of this resource insertion, and we also need a map data struct. And actually, let's include the tile width on here too. And now, instead of object references, we actually need object data. And this object is actually not even going to worry about templates. It's just going to hold all the data of the template on itself. So all of these properties are going to get merged in. It's also going to save the sprite sheet data. Both of these are going to derive debug. So you can almost think of this as like phase 1 of the loading, and these as phase 2. This is loading after all of that is loaded. Let's see if there's any other resource stuff I want to do. We're going to update sprite sheet data to be clonal. We're also going to give object reference and object type to pass on up to the object data itself. Is this mad? Because I named it wrong, that's why. So phase 1 is going to have these data that we were talking about before, including the object references and the object properties. And then after that, that's all going to get flattened into a map data, which will not have a handle to sprite sheet data, but the sprite sheet data itself, which is why we're making that clonable so that we can put it in here. All the data, all the object data, tile width, etc. So let's, we probably broke a couple of these loaders changing this data, so let's fix that. This is missing object type, so I need that. And give that a default value of none, so we know that it didn't get anything. That's a little happier. Now the raw map data is also gonna need tile width, which I believe I'm already grabbing. Yes, I am. So we're going to just chuck that in. Now back to main. We're not going to need this anymore, but I do want to move these in a second, so I'm going to wait on that. But this should only need the map server and images if we need them. We're just going to call this setup, because this is basically going to be what our setup function is going to turn into after we get rid of this one, I mean. Actually, let's grab these back because we actually want to grab map equals map server dot tutorial maps 0. There's our map data. And now the sprite sheet is going to be map dot sprite sheet. Look at how much easier this is already. The sprite itself is going to be, oh, we're going to still need to use the image assets for that. And it's going to do sprite sheet sprite unwrap. So let's get rid of all these loadeds because we've already proven that we're doing that just fine. Template is going to be map objects 0. It's not even going to be a template. It's going to be this object data. Do I care about the template sprite sheet? Sure. Why not? We don't need to load that anymore from here. And the template sprite is going to be that still. And then finally, this is actually going to be object sprite index, and that's going to be from here. Now, this has some anger. Okay, and these are trying to be copied. We're not trying to copy them right now. We're just referencing them. So we can grab the pointers instead. Great. And this is yelling at us because setup doesn't need to exist anymore in the way that it is. So this can go here, and this can go away. And then let's go ahead and pass these tutorial maps into the map loader plugin. So we're going to have map loader plugin take a vector of strings. Right, don't need that anymore. And of course, this is going to yell at us because we need to do this now. So where's map loader plugin? This needs to be a tuple with the first element being a vector of strings, a public vector of strings. There we go. Now that we have that being passed in, we can call that from self. So let's move our new old setup, basically doing exactly what setup was doing, and move that into map loader. So this is going to be a system. This is actually going to need map paths. So the easiest way to do this is to make another struct, map paths, that stores a vector of string. And this is going to be a resource. So we'll figure out how to initialize this in a second. But first, we also need somewhere to store these maps themselves. They're the map handles, so let's make another resource for that. Handle ID is redundant, but whatever. So now this system is going to take those strings and turn them into handles to raw map data, kind of just like the old setup did. And we're going to wrap up making this function next time. We'll finish up flattening our map data, and eventually we'll actually display some tiles. Thanks for watching. Peace.